G'day everyone. Welcome to It's ZuTime. My name's Alan Endres. I'm the founder of ZuCoins and ZuCaz. Today's the 1st of October, 2021, and a wonderful Friday. Most people get excited about Fridays because that means they've got the weekend. But with the latest world COVID lockdowns, one day blurs into another and nobody knows what's going on, other than every day is the same day. But today is going to be a little special treat today because we're going to delve into FOMO, F-O-M-O, FOMO, that wonderful term and word that's used, which is always associated with, in the context at least, that it's the fear of missing out. So we're looking and delving into a bit of the human psychology today, and my thoughts on how FOMO means a lot more than just the fear of missing out. And you'll understand a bit more as we get into that in today's episode 14. Now, why am I raising that? Because it's sort of circling into the human psychology of things in the journey of crypto. And we keep talking about that wonderful date in January in 2009 when the world was opened up to a thing called Bitcoin and blockchain. And that journey has started since then. So it's human psychology. It's a funny, wonderful thing. I'm always fascinated with and intrigued the way in which people think and behave and react to things. Having done physics, you can apply a lot of sciences. And also, as I said, I've enjoyed maths and I love litigation and all those sort of things, where you sort of got some, in law example, black letter law. In maths, it's very pure. And a lot of things circle around Newton's third law as well, which talks about for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that'll start to make a bit more sense in this episode when I introduce how the effect of Newton's third law can be applied in our daily lives, of course, and particularly in the crypto space. Now, look, one of the first things, a bit of a joke, really. I mean, people have looked at the panel behind me, this side over here, and our office decorators decided that natural look is something that fits in with the rest of the office. And I guess when you think of that panel back there, there's two schools of thought. One is, why don't you paint it? And the other is, maybe that's, got a different look and feel if you get a global view of actually what's happening. Now, sure, it hasn't got any varnish on it or anything like that. But if you take it out of context, then the perception is quite different when you pull it in line to the rest of our office that we have, which is very, very pleasant, new, has got that decorative features that are here. And of course, it puts it in a different context. And that's the same things that's been happening with crypto, believe it or not, because people zoom in on one little facet of an area, just like that panel at the back, this side over here. And we love it. And because it's in the context of the overall look and feel of the total office space that we have. Now, that's the human psychology of things. So FOMO is where we look at the approach that people have in relation to this space. And it's, as I said, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, social media fascinates the hell out of me, and the way people think and the way they react. Good old Newton. If I put something up that's, gets people agitated, well, of course, there's going to be Newton's third law in a play and you get a reaction. It's absolutely pretty special. So when you think of that, and you go back to 2009, what I wanted to say to you today is that the word or the letters FOMO actually relates to three meanings. And this is the meanings that I've attributed to, because on the one hand, you have the psychology of why crypto goes up, and why it can stay up, and why it has those little ups and downs in that trajectory, the journey, which is the journey that we say for a whole raft of reasons is on that path. And we talk about going to the moon. Well, is the moon far enough? Is this going to move itself to Mars? Are we going to see some intergalactic travel as a result of the things that we do? Now, you'll get your people out of left field saying, oh, he's really lost the plot today. But let's just put all of that together in where I'm coming from. Now, FOMO for me is in three stages. There's clearly three stages in this crypto space. And the first FOMO that I refer to in the way we analyse things, going back, is a definitional change of FOMO going back to 2009. And of course, those first few years, those first early years of Bitcoin in leading up to, say, around about the year 2014 or 15. And for me, FOMO means the attitude of and the psychology of people with this thing coming out. This bloke called Satoshi or group of people, no one has a clue. This can't be real. They looked at the panel behind. I keep pushing this side, but over here, and they only see this rough timber as to what it has, rather than the entirety of what Bitcoin was bringing to the world. Now, FOMO for me in those early embryonic years really is a term that we've applied, which means fraudulent or madness only. And you'll start to realize what I'm getting on about that. So we say the first stage in relation to the crypto history is FOMO in the meaning of fraudulent or madness only. Now, how do I back that up? Well, I backed that up. I've decided today to be a bit of a storyteller and share an article that I've kept all these years, which was produced in the year 2013. In fact, it was April the 11th. Thank goodness it wasn't April 1, so I wouldn't be sitting here as an April Fool's Day joke. But anyway, I'm going to read some of the paragraphs of that. And this is where the psychology at the time, which is, some years, 4 years after the release of Bitcoin, of what people were thinking and how the mainstream media has picked it up and their approach to convince others in relation to what is this incredible blockchain Bitcoin thing that we see today, but what was the attitude back then? So just sit back, grab that coffee. I'll read a few paragraphs from this article. Now, the heading, of course, is Fool's Gold. Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. The internet's favorite currency will collapse. That was the heading. Goes on. Bitcoin is a fantasy. It resembles a Ponzi scheme, and the wild claims made on its behalf reveal a great deal about a libertarian strain of thinking with deep roots in the American psyche. Bitcoin is the brainchild of a person or persons called Satoshi Nakamoto. So they don't even know who it is, but they're going to blame him for it. Nevertheless, that's the article. Goes on. The currency was launched in 2009. It is traded at less than 1 cent. 1 cent. That's what they wrote, 1 cent. As recently as a year ago, so we're talking 2012, a Bitcoin was worth less than $5. $5. This week, the price of a Bitcoin reached an all-time high of $266, an increase of more than 1,000% over the last 3 months. But then yesterday plunged to $105, finishing off at $165 the last time I looked. A tiny fraction of the trillions of dollars in currency, but not bad for the infinite brainchild of an anonymous brain. Bitcoin may be useful for certain types of transactions, especially illegal ones, but Bitcoin's defenders argue that the experiment has proved that a currency can come into existence and function without any government role, so designed as to make inflation impossible and bank transfer fees unnecessary. Meanwhile, stripped of the power to manipulate currencies to advance the nefarious ends, governments will collapse. Felix Salmon and many others have pointed out that the currency cannot exceed with a supply that's fixed, or if it grows too slowly. A currency is used to enter transactions. The more transactions there are, the more money you need. As the economy grows, a fixed supply currency becomes worth more in terms of goods and services. And people begin to hoard it, expecting if they wait a little longer, they will be able to buy more. Once hoarding takes over, circulation ends. It collapses. And with it, the function of the currency. Hoarding accounts for the large increase in the value of Bitcoins. And even more fundamental, a problem occurs with Bitcoins, and indeed any privacy currency for that matter, is that there is no way to limit the supply. But there is a way to prevent future Nakamotos from creating Bitcoin substitutes. Or is there? Maybe it's Bitcoin or Botcoin. And once it becomes clear that there is no limit, people will start to realize that holding could become worthless at any moment. And demand for Bitcoins and other currencies will collapse. And that's the end of this American psychic experiment. A regular Ponzi scheme collapses when people realize that the early investors are being paid out of the investments of later investments rather than the returns of the underlying asset. Bitcoin will collapse when people realize it can't survive as a currency. A real Ponzi scheme takes fraud. Bitcoin, by comparison, seems to be a collective delusion. A collective delusion. But more fundamentally, and this is the closing paragraph of this particular article, ladies and gentlemen, Bitcoin unites futuristic left-wing internet anarchism. The fantasy that the web can provide the conditions for a governmentless society. It is proof for both that government is not needed for much or much at all. But it won't work. The strangest feature of the Bitcoin saga is that people are so suspicious of government, but put their trust in Satoshi. Now, that's why I say that was the approach and the psychic at the time of what people looked at. As you can see, the panel behind me, rather than stepping back as to actually what was happening with crypto and analyzing that space for the bigger picture. Now, it took some time after that. I mean, $266. I mean, wouldn't we all love to be sitting on Bitcoin at $266? But the underlying strength was not about the person. And I've alluded to this in other episodes. It's not about Al Endres. It's not about Satoshi or whoever's there. It's about those that were astute enough to grab hold of those that are smart enough to move forward with the technology. In this instance, the blockchain. Now, the second stage of FOMO is the fear of missing out. Now, fast forward some years later, suddenly people realised that that turned out to be a whole lot of nonsense. Because guess what? The diatribe that was written wasn't supported by an analysis in any economic sense that circles back to comparing currency, fiat, with the crypto space under the quantitative theory of money. It's available for all to see. It's been around for centuries. And it doesn't matter. You can apply those same mathematical principles, MV equals PT, to both case scenarios. The difficulty with, and you need to listen to the earlier episodes on that. I mean, I've alluded to episode 4, which talks about long-term values using QTM. And I've alluded to episode 12 about the dissension that's coming between two powerful forces. That is, the centralized digital currencies versus the decentralized. Now, for me, stage 2, which is the fear of missing out, really accelerated that growth because people started to look at the bigger picture, the global picture of what was happening with blockchain, the technology, the underlying technology, and how significant that is. Now, the hoarding side sort of turned on its ears because the transactional volumes have increased massively. You can see that through the way the miners have accelerated their processing and capabilities. And you can see that in the transaction fees and the very coins that are being mined. People tend to want to move things around. You know, you don't sit on everything for the entire life. Remember, I've talked about that life's one big train ride. You know, at the end of the day, there's a station waiting for each and every one of us that we get off when we die. Now, the same principle happens with in this instance, crypto. At what station will you get on and what station will you get off? Now, those that were astute enough back when I say FOMO meant fraudulent or madness only, if they were still playing the game, imagine where they sit today. Now, unfortunately, not all of us are taking that risk appetite. So we moved into stage 2. There was the fear of missing out, and we just tipped our toe in the water and decided to get some Bitcoin. Now, that was higher prices because one advantage that this has, which is what that article failed in, is that you do have the limited supply and you don't have human stupidity or incompetence running the monetary systems, which comes back to government. It's all computer algorithms. And a computer doesn't worry about the psychology of what you or I are thinking. It's a bit like the Newton's third law of every action has an equal opposite reaction. You know, if I punch you in the nose, I'm sure I'm going to get one back. So you look at that stage and you look at, again, that train ride, and that train ride says, well, strategically, again, do you get on? Do you get off? But the crypto space keeps going. Now, sure, it had a drop at that stage, and that particular author was worried it went to $105. Well, others would say that's a buy opportunity, and that's what Bitcoin's been doing. It's still been heading on its way to the moon, and the blips and things that happen and goes down. Well, if you're a trader, that creates more opportunity. Now, where that price ends, who knows? But the advantage is there's a limited supply, which comes back to quantitative theory of money. Put it in circulation, put database in place, put consumers in use, create an end user case. And of course, that's what will drive the continuation of those pricings. Now, what happened then was we had stage 3. Now, the real clever ones in the world turn out to be those which, unfortunately, I hate to admit this, are those little beavers at the back of the government bodies, which we call bureaucrats, because again, I share with you the wisdoms of those in Parliament. If they've got a couple of, they've got a lot of they've got a lot of roos running around in the top paddock out there. They don't know what they're doing, but certainly the consistency in government is the bureaucrats. They've said, look, let's hijack the best that we can out of blockchain or Bitcoin, because we can use that to our advantage. We can start to really take hold of what that means for all of those issues that government wants us to be playing ball with. So I call the third stage, which is where we're at today, of FOMO. If you miss the second stage, well, you'll always get in and out, and you can always go back and look at the trajectory of Bitcoin, which I'm leading into where we say from ZuTime's perspective. But the third stage is clearly freedom over monetary occupation. Freedom over monetary occupation. Now, what does that mean? Now, that's something I've coined up because it reflects the division that's happened in the world between centralized and decentralized transfer of value. Now, if you look at the centralized component, everybody's now transitioning across to that side of the camp. There's two warring parties, if you like. One is those that continuation down the path of this centralization, and those that were having as that article pointed out, they said that they were delusional, but were they? Were they trying to put in place something that says, yes, we can still be compliant with the on and off ramps and the way in which we use Bitcoin, and you can still have all your controls and worry about illicit drugs and all that sort of stuff. The law enforcement agencies can do their job and get on with it and track those assets down. But do we have some sense of preservation of your privacy and your issues in relation to what you are doing with your transactions, which is the principles I talked about? We cannot rely now on those common law principles that talk about innocent until proven guilty, because they're accessing the data that's the very data of which decentralization is about. Now, why do I say we now have this situation of FOMO being stage 3, freedom over monetary occupation? Now, the only way that's going to happen is if all the developers and all the tech heads and all the geeks and all the Satoshis out there start to revisit the purposes of what happened in 2009 with crypto. That is decentralization, because it's been hijacked. Now, there's no one coming to the rescue of Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin would continue its path. It's not there to be decimated. I mean, that's been proven in all this journey against that article for a start. Where is that author now at 42,000 US dollars? Those sort of investments are where you have it's like an escalator. It's still going up. Sometimes you get in off and you go down the steps and the exits and you go up and down. But in this instance, one of the biggest elements you can take away from the decentralized crypto is some third party meddling in it. And that even incurs that's because of the transaction itself. But who's rescuing Bitcoin? Where are the developers that are saying you can't continue with the forks, you can't continue with the issues that they're throwing? Government's throwing back issues. Climate change is a problem because of the miners and the energy resources. All of these points now are all about honing in on bringing Bitcoin down. Bitcoin's a wonderful product. Wonderful because it's got the underlying technology. Now, when we look at that, and I worry about the FOMO, stage 3, we say to ourselves, how can we come to the rescue of Bitcoin? Well, we come to the rescue because we're bringing in technology that overcomes those issues in relation to scalability. Put the power back into the hands of the peers. Put the data into the hands of the peers. And sure, if you've been naughty, you've been a naughty, naughty boy. The beautiful thing about ZuCoins is that it still follows the processes that it's used on your phone. You can't deny that you've done the transactions, but what you can do is say, listen, go to the court and seek the appropriate channels to access that information on my transactions. If you've got nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. But again, take the time. I know it goes for a while, but take the time to listen to the episode, which is 12, that talks about the battle lines that have been set. The line has been drawn in the sand. And at this stage, it's overwhelming in favour of the governments, the bureaucracy, hijacking technology, bringing across those that had some vision and putting it in play for their own purposes. Now, in a quick summary, central banks, New Zealand announced yesterday that they're now exploring opportunities of a central currency as well. Why? And they're quite open about it. It's all about surveillance and your transactions. It's all about control, turning you off, turning you on. It's all about the data that they get to see globally. Now, it's one thing to be talking about a crypto in expectations of following the path. And as I've said before, many times, history repeats itself. But what we're looking at through split chain is rescuing that vision to put some balance back to the people. Now, you don't have to worry about, you might be in a situation where you don't like what ZuCoins is doing. You don't believe it. Well, that's where you sit as per that article. We're all delusional. There's accusations that Bitcoin's a Ponzi. Blind Freddy could have told you that it's not a Ponzi because of the supply and the buying and transactional between participants. When governments introduce quantitative easing, all they're doing is flooding the world with extra currency and bits of paper in the hope that they can create some monetary control and have monetary policy that sorts the inflationary issues out and sorts the rest of the world out because they've got so much debt. How in the hell, I can't even get my head around that anybody in government, particularly in the US or Australia, for example, can even contemplate trying to convince or con the public they're going to pay back, in America's case, $24 trillion of debt. Where are they going to conjure that from? Australia, $1 trillion. Now, the only answer to that is that these people are on the train. They know they're getting off at the next few stops, and they're going to leave the mess to the rest of us that are on the train still. So the camps have been divided. And if you think about that, and you think about ZuCoins and the technology, it is powerful. And it's powerful because we are coming to the rescue of decentralization. That's what it's all about. And the pricing will take care of itself. $60 today. What does that mean if we get the same article written and says they're under pressure because they've gone to $300 a coin and it's dropped to $160? Big deal. Because it won't stop the momentum, which is what's happened with Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest that suddenly we wake up a couple of years from now and we're all talking about the next article that was written during stage 3, which is the freedom over monetary occupation that I talk about, that FOMO phase. And suddenly we're talking $200,000 or $300,000 of Bitcoin. Why? Because those in the powers to be that are trundling down the central currency control have lost the plot. So that's the analysis, the psychology side. Now, from a FOMO point of view, whichever stage that you think you're in or you want to refer back to, there's an answer to the way in which the participants come in with crypto. Now, that answer clearly means you've got to step back. Don't sit there and look at that little picture of the panel and be disappointed that it hasn't been painted. Globalize the view, take a bigger picture, a screenshot of what this means and where it's heading, and that will create the answers for you. Because the thing about the crypto space, now, as I've said many times, I see 6,000 different stable coins and security coins and all those things are worthless to me. I can't get my head around something, as I've said before, an NFT. You know, how crazy would you be to think that you've got this asset and it may look nice and have a nice visual, a video or a copy of a Twitter from Elon Musk? You know, big deal. All it does is some genius has put that in to the connection, if you like, the link, and points it to someone else that's got that stored on a server, and you're now reliant upon that third party. Those principles don't change. That's what's been hijacked from Bitcoin, because the developers and those geniuses that are continuing to keep it, they're having trouble keeping it operational. That's the problem. Rather than stepping back and saying, well, what is the ultimate outcome? What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to stop double spend. We're trying to get the computer to make it work in its own right, so that the validation occurs amongst everybody. If you go off the network or come on it, you're still back in a position that allows you to be a part of that network to validate. But all the time we're pushed to the other side, and we go back and back into centralization of the data, and we put our data and our lives, our value, in the hands of someone else again. As I said, we've experienced this with the giants in advertising. They don't give a stuff about you. They're just there to make the money based on what you do every day. And that's the direction we're heading with this in the crypto space. Now, if there are others out there and developers that sit back and take notice, it doesn't matter if there's another concept that comes up that's superior to split chain. Because the reality is that's what the global masses need. That's the position we want to be in. It just so happens that ZuCoins, we got, as I said before, lucked out with the patents. We've got this incredible split encryption technology and data fragmentation, and we can take bits of that data, which compresses or reduces the workload and takes it out of the chain, but achieves a far better outcome. So have a think about that. Do some research yourselves. Look at the 3 stages that I talk about of FOMO. I'll just repeat them one more time. The first one, of course, is you've got fraudulent or madness only. That's where all the wallies come out of the blocks. That's the ones that can write all they like about ZuCoins and everything else, because that's their phase of FOMO. And that's the phase that was in, and the wording that I read to you in 2013. Now, the second stage is people sit up and take note and say, gee, it actually works. The bloody thing works. We're doing it all the time. There's been a growth industry that's occurred. I mean, who heard of Coinbase years ago? A couple of blokes got together and said, what do we want to achieve? We want person A to transact with person B. Exchanges have been around for thousands of years. And all of a sudden, we'll put that into a computer algorithms and create a platform, and suddenly you can trade crypto. Now look at the value proposition. That's on the back of Bitcoin. So that's the stage that leads to stage 2, where people then have the fear of missing out. But I say we're well past that now. We're into stage 3. Stage 3 of FOMO is, as I've said, freedom over monetary occupation. Monetary occupation by those that have hijacked the systems for central control for all those issues. Now, I think on that basis, if you marry that in with the support of the maths that we talk about, the support of the marketing and advertising strategies, we know the direction we're heading in order to bring this to the masses. And price will take care of itself. I mean, you can look at the historical graphs and charts of Bitcoin and just reflect upon that with all its problems. Because that's where the direction we know we're heading, what we're doing. And our team has that vision, not just looking at a board that sits behind me that hasn't been painted. They can see the rest of the office where there's very exciting areas in our office in terms of the staff environment and the technology we have, etc., etc. Step back, look at the bigger picture. And that's what you need to do with the crypto space. Don't be delusional in thinking this is going to be a great thing if the decentralization concepts are hijacked and embedded and locked in firmly with where the central banks want to go and be, as I described the other day. Now, I think that's enough that I wanted to paint that picture and give a different flavour to FOMO and where you sit and what part of that train you want to be on. I mean, the train will keep going. It just keeps going and going. As I said, it's like the train of life. You get on, you get off. So that's exactly the same that can happen because of reducing the impact and effect of third parties, that is humans. That's the problem globally in every aspect that we deal with for historical reasons. Humans have been the biggest problem on this planet in everything we do at every level. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, today's more of a philosophical type thinking program. Why I'm excited about your ZuCoins, why and how I see them working through and following in the footsteps of the great BTC and exploring a greater vision of BTC and where that can end up. So now, just a quick one on some updates. And I'll address a couple of questions there that's come through. So let's think about this. Next week, 4th of October, Monday, no Telegram. We've satisfied ourselves with that. You will find that the ZuCoin official community will be disengaged, disconnected, turned off, the plug pulled, and we've achieved everything we need from Telegram. There's no need for that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, remember, the ZuTime live broadcasts will be starting to commence at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, adjusted for daylight saving time down the road. And that gives a greater opportunity to our people overseas to at least see that live, which they want to do. The third thing is some of the episodes do go for a length of time. These are a record of my thinking and processes. I'm not expecting you to sit there for an hour. Those that want to whinge about that, well, what's called a replay, you can watch the timelines and you can, a bit like a mini series, it's quite easy to turn the button on and off and come back and listen at your own time or enjoyment. You don't need to go through the full hour or so. So I'm not sure whether people think that through, but there is a button there that allows you to stop and start in relation to the times. Now, the next episode, episode 15, is where I start to reveal, and I'm in a position to do so, about what we say our business and people are the guardians of the ZuCoin brand, which is coming, in terms of why we had the strategy with social media, and obviously circling back to the way the laws are shifting in putting pressure on these platforms to make sure that the idiots out there, the days are being numbered, and there's a cleansing of that sort of offensive type stuff that comes through. So we've been waiting to make our move on that. And just so you know, I couldn't do that until the last of our global trademarks had been filed and some additional patents in relation to ZuCoins and ZuCas, split chain and split lock. And I'm pleased to say that that's now filtering through both from an application perspective as well as actual these trademarks, etc., being granted. And that gives us the firepower now to, as we said, we had to patiently wait to switch off social media and then send a couple of rockets to the platforms if people want to copy or abuse or carry on with those brands, that we're being the guardians of those brands in terms of the product. So we're very pleased that we can, as you know, as a litigant, that can now put it back into my space as to putting pressure on these platforms to start to make sure that the ZuCoin and Zukaz, and Zukaz for that matter as well, the brands, but ZuCoin, Zukaz, Easy Bonds, etc., are going to see a shift in the way in which those brands are positively treated, and that pressure will be put to bear on the big platforms. So that's episode 15. Looking forward to that, which will give you some insights, again, circling back to our marketing strategies. I think that's all for me today, except a couple of questions there. Bob's come in and he says, isn't ZuCoin centralized through the PWA wallet and splitchain.com? Well, Bob, look, not being flippant about it, I'd invite you to take some time to read more material off the zucoins.com site. But the simple answer is that's the whole purpose of a PWA. Now, progressive web app means that the wallet that you receive is in your possession, and that is a link through that wallet, and the way the data is stored resides with you. You as the peer, that is the owner of the phone, that is your wallet. And that's exactly why, Bob, we deliberately went the PWA, because if you go through an app, you end up in a store, you end up in Apple Store, you end up in Google, and you end up under the full control of a central body, very similar to what I've just described on a government level, and you can be turned on and off as they see fit because of the discretions they have. Now, in Apple's case, it's probably a bit worse, because they also want to take fees off the top of your gross turnover, and that can be as high as 30%. I think Google's about 15% from memory. So, the developers of the app, the owners of the business, they bust their ass. They could do all the hard work, and Apple sits back and takes this huge collection of money for no reason other than putting up the store. Now, the store is nothing more than a glorified portal to make it easy for consumers to find where you are in both instances. If you've got the viral effect through a PWA, you actually generate that link when you transfer a fraction of a coin, and the next person gets the ability to retain that link through the progressive web app, and they become the server and host independently of any third party. So no, Bob, we don't have any control whatsoever on that network. It's the technology that we've embedded into the processes, which is the split chain, and that resides with each of the peers. And Alan Endres can get hit by a truck, and it doesn't matter one iota, because the network takes care of itself. And importantly, if you look at the Apple situation, they've been taken to task most recently in the courts. A company called Fortnite, which is a very big powerhouse gaming app, and all they wanted to do was create a third-party plugin, basically, to process their transactions outside of Apple's environment, and Apple shut them down. So you need to research a bit of that. We made a conscious decision on this probably 2 years ago, and it's taken a lot of work, because a lot of the functionality that you want, particularly from a Zukaz perspective, involves augmented reality. And there hasn't been a lot of advancements up until recently as to creating that augmented reality. That's the virtual spinning components in the app through PWAs. But I'm pleased to report that we have another genius in New Zealand, and he has been sensational whilst Robert's busy on the simulator and progress with the wallets. And whilst we're testing those other 20, those people, by the way, you're doing a fantastic job. Don't feel pressured. You've got next week, of which you can work your way through that. We've given you till Friday. But this guy in New Zealand has turned augmented reality on its head in the way in which the same, if not better, functionalities of that work through the PWA rather than through a dedicated app, which is where we've been spending a lot of money and time through Zukaz and through white labeling programs to allow that to happen. So, Bob, remember, read the website, check the documents, understand PWA, and look, do your own homework. You can put in the words PWA, Progressive Web App, and it'll give you some very good analysis of why that's on the decentralized component versus anything being centralized. And that's the whole philosophy behind what we want. Once we disengage, it's with the peers. Now, Clive's come in to receiving the wallets. Clive, I don't know whether you just sort of hop in and out, but you seem to have a daily consistency in relation to the wallets. I'm going to say it once and for all again. And this is why we have the live updates, Clive. That's why we're disengaging in social media to bring back into the portals that have one-on-one. There are another 20 odd wallets that have gone out. And for the last time, they've got the ability to continue with the way in which they're using those wallets until the end of next week, and we'll see how they go. So that's where we're up to. And that's the situation that we're looking at in relation to the wallets. So Clive, just the updates are the same. If I suddenly announce that 2,000 wallets with 10 ZuCoins are going out, you'll be the first to know with the other 2,000 people, because I'll be saying it at the same time. Pretty simple. That's why we have these live broadcasts, Clive, and appreciate you being on board. So thank you very much. But that's the answer to that particular question. Now, yeah, look, Bob's back again. Bob's obviously intrigued by the way in which the peer acts as host and server. Look, the progressive web app, Bob, again, without repeating myself, and I'm not the technical genius here, we have some papers being produced, and the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, when you actually, if you are a ZuCoin holder, then you will get all the luxury of seeing that code and seeing how that works and the way in which the peer acts as host and server themselves. I mean, the concept and the problem with storing data, as I've said many a time, Bob, is that we get lazy and we get too much data, and you then rely on someone else serving and hosting that content for purely simple reasons in the end. Now, if you fragment that data and you have lesser load of data, then there's no reason that the firepower of the humble phone on an individual basis can store what's relevant to that person. It's quite a no-brainer, actually, Bob. So, and also it removes and eliminates the risks that are associated with the centralization of data, even in a blockchain. I mean, can we trust governments to centrally store all data? Well, I'm speaking from personal experience. The answer is a straight out no. When we received $8.725 million, it turns out that the data that was stored, if you like, through government channels, and all the geniuses that put that together, and the geniuses of encryption, and the geniuses that created the accessibility to that data, it all went off a cliff. Now, that's where there was the password sharing, and that's where there was issues of money loosely being funded out from the Reserve Bank because of those particular systems. So that's not Alan Enders waffling on. That's the audited report produced by Ernst & Young in April of 1999. And it's on my Davis Samuel links. We've been able to release that report, and you will get an insight into either A, the stupidity, or government incompetence in the spend that they do on data in that regard. And of course, it's a magnet. Mass storing of aggregated data in any sense is a magnet for the way in which hackers like to go into a major storage of data, and that's why we have these problems today. They're not going to go out there and hack into 1 billion individual phones. The maths of that doesn't add up, but they're quite happy to have access to a player that has 1 billion people's data stored in a central point. For example, the way they've hacked into the Liquid exchange, which $90 million was stolen. And this goes on and on and on. You can do a search and just put in there the reveals and the disclosures of data that's been hacked from many a company and those processes. Now, Bob's back again. I think he's going to give Bob's identifying himself. He's one of these little clowns that we talk about in social media, Bob Williams. I mean, sometimes you'd think these blokes would come up with some more anonymous, ingenious name, but what I do enjoy about it, though, as I said in the past in my latest updates, people like Bob actually create the traction and the value proposition, and all they're doing is making huge sums of money for Twitter and Facebook and so on as a result of their incompetence and stupidity. But and they think they're anonymous. They run around and it's all exciting with what they're doing. So little Bob's come back in, and on the pretext of wanting to ask a few serious questions. This is the sort of stuff that we talk about, and I have talked about in my advertising update and marketing, which was episode 13, and the way in which we tested that. But look, Bob's come in and he's wanting to know about the Texas Department of Banking. Now, as all the ZuTime holders will know, we sent out the document in relation to that, and that goes back to 2015. And the technology that was used, to dumb it down for Bob, because Bob's having trouble, if you have a payment processing system that does peer-to-peer, which is let me compare that to, say, a PayPal or MoneyGram or any of those, you are putting yourself into the jurisdiction in relation to needing a money remittance license. Okay, now there's 53 odd states, and that's the requirement. Now, unless Bob's, an attorney in America or he's got some legal knowledge, I'll dumb it down again, Bob. When you process in the payment sector in terms of merchants, as long as there's an agency relationship between the merchant and the consumer, and that agency relationship can be proved, that is, the consumer is going to pay some goods, money for goods to the merchant, and the merchant receives that payment, as long as the consumer ended up being the merchant ended up being agent of the consumer under those US laws, then, and you can prove that either in a legal contractual sense, or you can prove it through the way in which your software is built, then of course, what that letter says, Bob, is that you are exempt from money remittance licensing. It's in the second or first paragraph. It's pretty clear, Bob. So I just thought I'd share that with the ZuTime holders in case you don't understand that, and maybe Bob's thinking about setting up his own remittance company and he needs advice. So the way we did it is that it's too cumbersome to look at contractual relationships with every customer that onboards at every point in time. If you're turning over $20 or $30 million, in relation to that. So what we did is my IT guy, Peter Hamilton, created a network of notification pins, which are unique pin-coded pins that affect the transaction. And those pins, unbeknown to everybody, which is why the software of Easy Bonds is so valuable, are accessed and stored by the merchants regularly, automated in their API that they have with the payment button in order to receive funds from the consumer. Now, when the consumer triggers that transaction, it triggers a transactional PIN, a secret code, if you like, at the time of the transaction, and it goes searching for that at that particular merchant. Now, there's hundreds of millions of PINs, hundreds of millions of lengthy, 24, 50 digit codes, if you like, a bit like a private key or public key. And if it triggers that PIN to that merchant, it then triggers the merchant in reverse accepting the transaction, which is the agency issue. Now, it was that software issue that gave us the tick in relation to the Texas Department of Banking and other states, because it complied with digitally, electronically, and through the software, those laws and regulations that makes the exemption. Now, I hope that makes it clear, Bob. I mean, one day you may come to Albury, where we are here. I'm Alan Endres, so I know who I am, and Bob or Bertie or Ralph or whatever you like. It's more than a pleasure. Come and visit, and we'll give you a lecture on the law, and we'll give you a lecture on software, and we'll give your brain a bit of a turn in terms of things you'll learn. So that's answer to that one, Bob. I think that's about all we've got. I think the Wallies have gone off the question, the Q&A. I think that took it a lot longer than I'd hoped today. I just wanted to make sure across FOMO and make sure that your heads are in the right space as to what's happening in the world. And Bob, if you're not on that train and you don't get on and you miss out on the ZuCoins, a little bit of advice for you. We might have a job for you painting the back of that board. Cheerio, everybody. I'm Alan Endres. Be kind, be ZuKind, because it's ZuTime and it's coming.